Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining in with me tonight. Dr. Judy WTF here, Dr. Judy Rosenberg. I am the director of the Psychological Healing Center and the creator of the Be the Cause mind map system for healing human disconnect. And tonight's show is going to be about individual and global clashing. We're going to detail panel 6, which is really a metaphor for the clash of the isms. I'll get more into detail, but as you can see from the picture's always worth 1,000 words. If we are going to not have a way to connect with each other, if we're going to polarize from each other, we're headed for a major clash, and we're already in one in oh so many ways. So I'm going to start by saying that if you want an outline of the system, and I am a systems thinker, please grab your free copy of my PDF book, Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect. And this will break down for you all the panels, and you can apply it to yourself and your healing journey. And of course, it's always best to combine a healing journey with the aid of a therapist. So please also avail yourself of a free 15-minute consultation. We have wonderful staff members available to talk to you and break down the mind map for you and help you to deal with your individual issues so that you can be the cause of a better outcome for part 2 of your life. So many of you do know me and some of you don't. For those of you who do not know me and about me, the mind map was originally a macro attempt to create a global healing. And it was originally called Join the Human Race. And Join the Human Race was intended to help people move from a disenfranchised world into a united humanity. And so today I'm going to start on a micro basis and work my way up to a global basis so that we can really truly understand that we are interconnected. And if we don't heal individually, we cannot expect to heal globally. And so the project Join the Human Race became a macro to micro project called Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect, with the intention, of course, of healing global disconnect. I want to start by reading the intention I had back in the day. Join the Human Race was a call for unity. I so wanted to launch this project on a global scale. However, frankly, I just didn't know how to do such a huge global call to action. And so the intention was the following. As a human race, we have become fragmented into nations, religions, social classes, politics, and races. This fragmentation has resulted in clash and fallout in the form of human atrocities. And we are living that every day, and we've been living that for many, many, many generations, maybe since the beginning of human existence. The challenge, although we've been able to soar to unlimited heights in many areas of human endeavor, we have not yet accomplished the final and most important frontier, to come together as a united humanity. And this is a call-in show, everybody, so please feel free to call in. And we're going to start with an article, a wonderful article that I found. And I want to refer to this article because it talks all about ethics. And ethics is the key, one of the keys, I think the key to mental health, along with the pathway to healing, which is unearthing many, many childhood wounds. So the mind map started with, as you know, the global idea in mind, and then it titrated down into the micro version of healing on an individual level. So I want to refer to this article, and then we can get into the mind map on the childhood wounds level. But this is such a profoundly great article to present this topic of individual and global clashing, I can't resist but to read excerpts from it. Couldn't really find the author, but it was written in February 21st, 2014, Why Every Political and Economic System Eventually Fails and What You Can Do About It. And I believe the author is, it's from Common Sense Ethics. And I believe the author is Leah, a librarian, and she doesn't state her last name disappointingly in this article, but I do want to give her credit. So let's start with a quote from Samuel Adams. He says, "No people will tamely surrender their liberties, nor can any be easily subdued when knowledge is diffused and virtue is preserved. On the contrary, when people are universally ignorant and debauched in their manners, they will sink under their own weight without the aid of foreign invaders." So let's go back to the mind map for a moment, and I'll kind of go back and forth between the mind map and principles that this article very, very much reflects, which are in line with my principles. So if you see panel 1, you could see from darkness. This was the original words of the mind map. It was the macro version, and you could see that in the background is the light, and then in the foreground are all these shadows. From a global perspective, this is a metaphor for the potential of united humanity, and then the fracturing off of this united into what I call the isms. And these isms refer to political isms, religious isms, economic isms, social isms, race isms, all kinds of isms. And we're just so ismed today that we're pretty much set up for some clashing. And my intention was to create a united, not a divided humanity. So you can see that as we move from the darkness, this darkness which overshadows us, which we'll call for now, might as well use the metaphor of childhood wounds and unethical behavior. And in my view, ethics and mental health are really, really aligned. They are really related to each other, because the more mentally unhealthy we are, the more unethical we become. And think about our DSM, for example, which I'm not really a big user of, but we've got all these categories, we've got all kinds of personality disorders, and then we've got sociopathy and so on. And the further away we are from being balanced, the more we are injured, the more we are going to succumb to filling the hole in our soul through all kinds of perverted and horrible and unethical ways. So when we are acting out of our wounds of childhood, we tend to be more unethical. And just to show you the extreme of that, if we go for a moment to panel number 6, which is a representation of this clash of the isms. And you can see here's where the rubber meets the road. From a psychological perspective, this represents the clashing of the psychological phenomenon that does not work for us. So this is the breakdown. The final breakdown is, as we all know, homicide, suicide, loss of life, other horrible forms of breakdown, could be nervous breakdown and divorce and family breakdown. And these breakdowns take us further and further away from our light, which is a metaphor, again, for our mental health. And on a global scale, it is a metaphor for interconnection, united humanity. So you could see that as we move from the individual to the global, we can parallel process it and go back and forth and see that if we're not healthy individually and we expand that, what do we have? We've got a big mess, because our mental unhealth times a billion, schmillion, I'll call it, because I don't know how many people inhabit the earth, is going to be very, very, very toxic. Okay, so back to the article. In this article, she says that politics and economic systems and any type of government are inherently more moral, or it doesn't matter what political system you choose, is what she's saying. If there's an immoral sense in the background of the people within the system are not moral and ethical, the system is going to collapse. And she says, regardless of the organic values of various economic and political systems, they are all eventually doomed to corruption, oligarchy, and failure if the people involved in them are not ethical. In other words, ethics comes first. And I'll say something, prior to ethics comes mental health, because if you don't have mental health, you cannot develop a proper ethical system. So let me go now to the micro level so you can understand how this macro and this micro system are interconnected. So on a micro system, I speak much in my videos and in my private practice about childhood wounds, and I concentrate on 5 of them, and then I'll bring in the 6th one, which is the narcissistic injury. So the 5 wounds that we focus on at the Psychological Healing Center are sexual abuse, physical abuse, neglect, smothering, and the apathy is the narcissistic abuse. And of course, there's physical abuse. So if you look at all the abuses and the neglects, you can see that if a child is subject to these abuses and neglects, it'll shatter the psyche. And when the psyche shatters, we cannot develop properly. And the further we're taken away from being connected to our family of origin, the more corrupt, if you will, our family blueprint is, the more unethical our family blueprint is, the less we have to rely on as models of integrity, as models of mental health. So you can see as we progress through the mind map that on a micro level, if we have many wounds of childhood, we will react to them, and then we will encode a lot of garbage, meaning we'll encode a very, very warped and cracked lens of perception of ourselves in the world. And this garbage registers as these horrible negative core beliefs, such as I'm not good enough, I'm not beautiful enough, I'm not valuable, and the list goes on. And we actually live by this code. So you could see that if we don't have proper nourishment from our family of origin, namely our primary, secondary caregivers, usually mother and father, if multi-generationally we suffer from bad blueprinting and horrible multi-generational wounds, we're really building a house of cards. And this house of cards is not going to be sustainable. And if we as individuals are not sustainable, the next step is, as you could see, panel number 4, 5, and 6. It's inevitable. If we are not building ourselves properly as individuals, if our individual isms are not properly built, then our blueprint is going to be full of what I refer to as psychoviruses. These are these messages that go into our head. They penetrate us because they're nonverbal and verbal messages we psycho-inherit from our families, and it warps our perception of ourselves in the world. And if anyone wants to ask a question, this is a call-in show, and I welcome all questions, and I usually concentrate on a particular topic pertaining to some kind of childhood abuse or neglect or narcissistic abuse. But today I wanted to go a little bit more from micro to macro, because what we're faced with now is such a breakdown of such a global breakdown, and only we can correct this. And we are responsible. We could be the cause of a pathway to healing, but only if we stop finger pointing only at our government and our system. We've got to own our own stuff. We've got to own our own stuff on a global level by healing on an individual level. And so I wanted to continue a little bit with the article, unless there is a call-in and some questions, and maybe some of you can relate to the pressures of being in this world today, the fracturing of humanity along lines of capitalism versus communism or socialism, or wearing a mask or not wearing a mask, or who you voted for or who you don't want to vote for, and which country is the most dangerous and who we're going to clash with next. Well, this is all a creation as a result of our own individual mental unhealth times a billion plus. Okay, so this virus has gone global, and it's not only the coronavirus that's gone global. The psychovirus is quite gone global. And I do want to hear from you. I want to hear your thoughts and your opinions, of course. And please feel free to call in. And if you don't feel like calling in, you can ask a question in the chat room. And I can't really see the chat room, but my tech support is happy to read it off to me if you have a question you'd like to present there. And just remember that in order for us to heal globally, we've got to attend to these childhood wounds. So let me go on a little bit more with this article. She says that we must look at virtue and character in politics. Governments, political parties, communities, and economic systems are extensions of us. If we are unethical, we will never have a moral system, no matter how authoritarian or anti-authoritarian, capitalistic or communistic, left or right the system is inherently. So she's saying that the linchpin is ethics, because even if we have one brand of a system, if the people within the system are not ethical, then the system is not going to sustain. It will absolutely eventually collapse. So her solution is to transform yourself. She uses the word change. I like to use the word transform, because to me, change means changing your behaviors, changing your thoughts. And I'm not a fan of changing things, because I'm more of a fan of getting to the root cause so that we can undo things. And then by virtue of undoing things and examining the damaging blueprint that we psycho-inherited and unraveling that, we can then transform and shift. By transformation, I'm really talking about shifting out of an old paradigm into a new paradigm. So in this article, she talks about shifting out of this unethical behavior. And now I want to go a little bit deeper into the mind map, because one of the principles of the mind map is to self-reflect and self-correct. So everyone owned their own stuff, and everybody was self-reflecting and self-correcting. And if everyone realized that indeed we are interconnected, we really wouldn't be that interested in hurting another human being.
I do have a question right here.
Oh, great. Okay, thanks. Go ahead.
It says, can children who have been sexually assaulted when really young start to abuse other children at a young age? If yes, how young could this start?
That's a really, really great question. When children are abused at a very young age, I consider it a pre-verbal injury. So this is something that is actually absorbed in the amygdala. Complex PTSD is PTSD that hasn't been processed. And that's what happens when people do not have a trauma properly processed. Then what happens is they will project their feelings onto other people. And thank you for that question, because when we're in pain and we're not conscious and we don't have ethics yet, because we haven't learned them early on, we just kind of want to vomit up our feelings on others so that we can evacuate these feelings, rid ourselves of the pain. So yes, children, even young children, can get overstimulated and start acting out. Now, in terms of at what age, I can't truly answer that question, but I've seen time and time again, case upon case of patients that come in and they tell me about their violations, sexual violations, and then they talk about the multi-generational, that this acting out happened from one generation to the next, and it trickled down, and then it trickles down to brother and sister. And so we've got incidents where brother and sister are now stimulating each other, acting out upon each other because grandpa touched them. And so, yes, they will reenact this. And so to put it on a global basis, if we're not well and if we're treated abusively, if we're sexually abused, if we're physically abused, if we're neglected, if we're verbally abused, if we're smothered and controlled, if we have parents who are narcissistically inclined, meaning they lack empathy and they use the children to fill their own agendas, then we won't properly develop. And if we don't properly develop, we will project one of the defense mechanisms that we use when we're in pain is we will project our pain onto other people. And you could see this again in panel 6. I'm going to use panel 6 a lot tonight. It's a metaphor for the clash. So when a child who's been sexually abused, or anybody who's been abused on any level, they don't know how to process their feelings. Either they will implode with the feelings and they will get depressed, or they'll cut themselves, or they'll act in and demean and devalue and destroy themselves, or they'll act out and project all of this pain onto other people. And what we want to see happen therapeutically is, instead of imploding or exploding, they get to unload therapeutically, reprocess these feelings so that they no longer have to swallow them or vomit them on other people. And that keeps people ethical. You see? Can you see the link now between mental health and ethics? If you're mentally healthy, you don't have the desire to spill your feelings all over another person. If you have another pathway to expression, you don't need to swallow your feelings, and along with swallowing them, drink a bottle of alcohol or take whatever drug, or even swallow too many prescription pills. You don't need to do it that way, because the mind map offers other pathways out of this mess. And so again, taking it to the global level, if we have a bunch of leaders, whether they call themselves communists or capitalists or Democrats or Republicans, the message is the same. If it's a corrupt system, it doesn't matter so much the system. What matters is the corruption within the system, and that system will absolutely fall. So I want to again make that connection. Mental health is parallel to mental unhealth will lead to unethical behavior. Mental health will lead to strong ethics. Okay, so she alludes to let's see, there was a really great example here. Oh, she talked about critical mass, and I talk a lot about critical mass also, that when you've got a system where there's just more good in it than the darkness, then think of a balancing scale. The critical mass has a chance to correct itself, but if there's just too much negativity, if there's too much abuse, then we're more likely to be at the effect rather than to be the cause. So critical mass is critical, and she talks about people inside a system. Let's say there are a few people within a system who are not ethical. Well, if there are just a few of them, then maybe it won't unbalance the system. But if there's a critical mass, large majority of the people who are acting unethically, it will absolutely unbalance the system. So she says that the system will fail from within. And if enough other people on the planet are not ethical as well, then those systems will be conquered from the outside by force. And you could see it all over the globe. You could see it politically. History has records of systems that have collapsed from within, and history has records of systems that have collapsed from outside forces. She talks about Russia after the Bolshevik Revolution. Both Lenin and Stalin allowed top party officials to live richly off the largesse of the proletariat. So here we had a communistic system, but it wasn't quite communistic because clearly the Marxist equation didn't really apply to the people on top. So although in an ideal world they meant to be a system of sharing and equality and so on, the leaders were unethical and they were taking the cream off the top and left very little to the people. The more unethical and restrictive the system is, the quicker that system will fall. Okay, and it's the same with family systems. So let's go back to the family system. And if there's anybody who wants to call in, please do. I love talking to my audience. I'd love to hear from you.
I do have another question.
Okay, and please feel free to call in. I'll answer the questions in the chat room, but do feel free to call in. And what is the question, please?
It says, how do we forgive a parent about abandonment? I'm 40 and I can't seem to forgive my father. Even after all this time, I tend to avoid conversations and get anxious when I talk to him.
Okay, so I think a lot of therapies lean heavily on forgive, forgive, forgive. And I'm more a fan of forgiveness is earned. Okay, so I want to first say, do not blame yourself for not forgiving your father. This is a tragedy. Did you say father? Is that correct?
Yes.
I think so. Yeah. Okay, so father is supposed to be the protector of the family. And if this father injured you, and it probably, from a multi-generational perspective, he may have also been neglected and he didn't have the tools to be the father. So we can put it in terms of the system gone wrong. So from that perspective, you can say, well, he didn't have a lot to work with. He didn't have a very good blueprint himself. So what can I expect? But that doesn't really clear the slate, does it? And that doesn't exactly make you feel better, because in spite of our psychological history, we all have a responsibility to heal. We still do. And so what I would say to you is, if you're not feeling very forgiving, forgive yourself for not being willing maybe to forgive your father now or forever. And a lot of people that come to the Psychological Healing Center ask me, should I go contact with my parents, no contact with my parents? What if my parents neglected me or sexually abused me, or, whatever level of abuse? And this is such an individual choice. Okay, so where the line has to be put is, put yourself first and forgive yourself for being in a situation where you probably blamed and shamed yourself for the way your parents treated you, because that's what children do. They'll blame themselves for the abuse that the parents inflict upon them. Why? Because they think there's something inherently unlovable and wrong. So that's what I would say to you is examine the negative core beliefs that he left you with and forgive yourself for believing in those core beliefs, because those core beliefs are based on his psychopathology, okay, with the emphasis on psycho. And forgive yourself for buying into lies and misperceptions and projections. And the only thing to do going forward is to clean yourself. And that's the key. So, what does cleaning yourself mean? Well, cleaning yourself, first of all, is the intention to take inventory of who done it, what happened, how it impacted you emotionally, how it impacted you cognitively, how it created patterns in your life that brought you down into chaos, that created defense mechanisms that then were best attempts at shielding you from pain, but ended up in many circumstances being addictions and psychological prisons and isolationisms that kept you from seeking and receiving love and being in connection with other people, and eventually breaking you down. So your first responsibility is to yourself. And when I talk about narcissism, a very, very common topic, I talk about it as a system gone wrong, often a multi-generational system gone wrong, where the parents put their own agendas, their own needs and wishes before the needs of the children in the family. So it's like a 180-degree turnaround. And that's not ethical, is it? Just from an ethics point of view, it's unethical to abuse your child. It's unethical to neglect your child. It's unethical to control and smother your child. It's unethical. Okay, these wounds are, from an ethics perspective, they're unethical. From a psychological perspective, if they're unhealthy. So can you see how the two concepts are related? And I'll give a minute or so for people to call in and ask a question or two, because it's really, really important for us now in the world that we live in to take global responsibility by taking individual inventory and healing ourselves, because there's just no way. I mean, think about it. How can we get along with people of other races and religions and cultures and politics and economics and different languages and so on, when we can't even get along with our own family of origin? And it's got to start there. So if you're a mother or you're a father or you're a mother to be or father to be, or if you're a family member, then start by healing yourself so that you don't project these feelings onto the people that you love. Now, this article talks about more of a societal solution, and she talks about self-centeredness in the community, and her solution here is to recognize that we're all interconnected, and to recognize that the solution is to give more to the community and to use your skills, your talent, your passion to share the light with others. And if you have any venue to do that, do it. I mean, I'm very fortunate. I have this particular platform where I can speak and I can psychoeducate people. And it doesn't matter if you're doing it in front of a camera or if you're just sitting with your client because you're their accountant, or you're serving them food at a restaurant, or they're your client because you're cutting their hair. There's always something that you can impart to another human being that helps them to see clearer truth. So although we may wear certain roles in society, we're always messengers to each other. And if we are part of a chain of interconnection, that means that when you and I get together, the interest is not only in making myself better or making you better, but to create a third entity called an us. And that's what I call synergy. So if we can go down for a minute to panel number 7, the solution here is building synergistic relationships. So instead of clashing of the isms, if you're of a different culture, of a different political ism, or a different religion, or a different socioeconomic, it doesn't matter. We don't have the right to power over people. We don't have the right to project our feelings on other people just because of our differences. And if we can't honor these differences and embrace them and share them with other people, then we're really not part of a synergistic system. And to me, synergy is part of ethics. That's just the way I see it, because if we're in the best interest of elevating humanity, then part of that contribution is being the light to other people. So in this article, she specifically says, wrestle with your own demons, which is what I'm saying. Go down to the childhood wounds and do wrestle with your own demons. Self-reflect and self-correct. That's a term that I like to use to look in the mirror, own your own stuff, educate yourself. The mind map is an educational system so that you can educate yourself psychologically. There's also tons of education out there in the form of books and videos and all kinds of ways that you can educate yourself. Get involved at the local level so that you can be a contribution to your society, whether you get involved by having a voice to speak, or whether you get involved by physically helping, by distributing food to the needy, or helping people to study who don't have tutors and mentors and so on. Get involved, because it's only through sharing our light that we're able to build our own character and help people evolve. And if you look at panel number 8, after the interconnectivity of panel 7, you can see that we at this point can recognize that we can be the cause of building a better blueprint. So you can see that the DNA is now silver and strong and made of steel, and the bonds are solid. And you can see the little people going up the ladder of evolution. And you can see that each person here is helping another person up the ladder, or being helped by another person up the ladder. And that is a model for me of ethics and synergy and cooperation and healing. And remember, we won't have the propensity to do that if we're at the effect of life. It's really, really hard to help others when we're depressed and anxious and bleeding out psychologically and compromised physically. So when I mean synergy and building health, I also mean building your physical health, meaning self-care, taking vitamins, exercising, making sure that you get plenty of sleep, because no matter how psychologically sound you are, if you're physically run down, yeah, it's really, really tough. So the number one person you need to feed health-wise is yourself, because if you're not strong, you can't be strong for other people. So if there aren't any other questions, I just want to talk a little bit more about the Psychological Healing Center, and then I'm going to do something that I do usually called Shrink That Tune. Are there any questions in the chat room?
Not right this second.
Okay, appreciate that. And would anybody like to call in and talk about their journey? Maybe some of you have taken a journey where you projected on other people, or you've self-harmed, and you healed that piece of yourself, and now you feel that you're in a better position to be a giver and to be a role model for other people, and contribute more toward global health. I'd love to hear from you.
I do have a really good question right here.
Okay.
It says, how old is too old for help? At what point will therapy no longer help after a childhood wound of this magnitude?
No, there's no age. It's never too late. Never too late. People of all ages, and I think that you can't unsee what you see. And once you see the truth, and the mind map is a system of revealing the truth, and that's why I use the metaphor of the Wizard of Oz. And Dorothy takes the yellow brick road journey, and then when she discovers that Oz is just this really fake person manipulating the lovers, and a man who's really a nothing and a nobody, and acts like he's great and wonderful. Of course, it's a metaphor for narcissism and the false self and so on. That's why I use it in my book. Once you see the truth, and once you understand that you've been at the effect of a system gone wrong, and parents who themselves are injured, and multi-generations, and once we take off that mask, the truth crumbles the lies, and the old system falls apart. And that's why globally, when something is not built properly, it needs to fall apart. If a building is not built properly, it needs to fall apart. And oftentimes it's better to be proactive and take it apart. So no matter what your age, I don't care if you're 90 something or over 100, and you're suffering, and you could still understand and have desire to heal, then call. Why spend the rest of your days at the effect of these childhood wounds when they're based on lies and misperceptions? And another piece of the work is to complete these psychological files, because if you're living with unhealed wounds, what then happens is we replicate the virus, and we replay this broken record. I call it the WTF, or the what the Freud. It's torture. You're living in this torture chamber of reverberating thoughts and triggers, and then your world is actually wounds, reactions, and codings, chaos, defenses, and breakdowns. So there's no panel number 7, 8, 9. I was just telling a patient of mine that if you don't solve it at the causal level, you're never going to arrive to panel 7, 8, 9. There's no interconnection and paradigm shift. There's no healing to be had. And certainly there's no being the cause and a sense of peace and unity, because it's just this hostage torture chamber situation. And I love the fact that I help people break out of this psychological prison, and I have a staff of people who are trained specifically in the mind map system. And by following this 9-panel journey, you go step by step. Unlike traditional therapy that has no real system and doesn't have a beginning and a middle and end, this is very specific. And think a bit about it as psychoeducating and processing the wounds of childhood, how you reacted to them, and the encodings of the past, how they broke you down, and then how to recode. So it's kind of like, let's look at your encode, decode it, and then recode it. And it doesn't matter what age you are, truly doesn't matter at all. And so if there are no other calls, let's see if I can make another point or two. So how do we solve this? We talked a little bit about that. We've got to straighten out our lens of perception, because that's why we're in this hell. Because we think we're not good enough. We think this, we think that, we project this, we swallow that, we self-harm, we harm others. And It's a mess. It's just a mess on an individual level, and then it becomes a global mess. The healthier we get, the less we feel the need to victimize, blame, and shame others. So the mind map is geared to create a model for coexistence where the light of you is in conjunction with the light of another, and therefore you, by virtue of your interconnectivity with another healthy human being, creates even more. That's called synergy. In order to play a better game of life, we need to create the synergistic system. And anything less than that will cause, as I mentioned, chaos, defenses, and breakdowns. And so we can't afford not to heal ourselves, because we can look at the world and look at the horror on our screens and just wait for doomsday, or we could just at least start by healing ourselves and taking responsibility and raising our ethical values through using a system for healing our childhood wounds. So if there are no other questions in the chat room.
No other questions.
Okay, so I'm going to go to shrink that tune. Sometimes I don't shrink a tune, but tonight I will shrink a tune. And remember, the consultations are free, and you can avail yourself of a free 15-minute consultation with a staff member. You can get the free download of the PDF book, Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect. You can also order a hard copy at Amazon.com. And you can, of course, purchase the Mind Map video series. It comes with a journal. It's a download, so don't wait for anything in the mail. It comes with a download and the video and me lecturing on all the 9 panels and breaking it down. And it's best watched in conjunction with doing the work with a therapist on staff. And so please do call, and everybody on staff is very well trained in the mind map, and they're quite gracious in giving free consultation. So I'm going to shrink the tune by one of my favorite bands, Black Eyed Peas. Where is the love? What's wrong with the world, mama? People living like they ain't got no mamas. I think the whole world's addicted to the drama, only attracted to the things that'll bring the trauma. So there's the panel 4, 5, 6, and alluding to the fact that, you know, they've got no mamas. They've got no secure attachment to the primary caregiver. Overseas, yeah, we're trying to stop terrorism, but we still got terrorism here living in the USA, the big CIA, the Bloods and the Crips and the KKK. So those are the isms. So I love this song in the context of what we've been talking about tonight, because they go from the micro to the macro. But if you only have love for your own race, then you will only leave space to discriminate. And to discriminate only generates hate. And when you hate them, you're bound to get irritated. Yes, madness is what you demonstrate, and that's exactly how anger works and operates. Wow, I didn't know this song was really a description of everything that we've been talking about tonight. This projection, you know, that's how anger works. Man, you got to have love. This will set us straight. And I'll add to that ethics. Take control of your mind. That's right. Heal thyself and meditate. Let your soul gravitate to the love. People killing, people dying, children hurt, and you hear them crying. Can you practice what you preach? And will you turn the other cheek? In other words, don't do to others what, you wouldn't do to yourself. Father, Father, help us. Send some guidance from above, because people got me questioning, where is the love? Well, the love is the love that you generate for yourself by loving yourself enough to clean up the pain that was inflicted on you, so that you can then stop the madness upon other people. It just ain't the same. Old ways have changed. New days are strange. Is the world insane? And that is what we're seeing. If love and peace is so strong, why are there pieces of love that don't belong? Nations dropping bombs, chemical gases filling lungs of little ones, with ongoing suffering as the youth die young. So ask yourself, is the loving really gone? And then it just goes on and on. The chorus line, sing with me all, one world, we only got one world, one world. That's right, we only have one world, and if we mess that up, then we're at the causal realm of that, and we could be the cause of the other side of it, meaning cleaning up ourselves and cleaning up the world. Something's wrong, something's wrong, something's wrong with the world. Yeah, we only got one world. That's all we got. So since we only have one world and we're all interconnected, we're all responsible. So let's start with ourselves. Let's clean up our mental unhealth. And I offer you a pathway, the Be the Cause Mind Map system, for cleaning this up. It's very organized therapy. You'll learn a lot. You won't be left with a blank stare of, well, I feel better for the moment, but I didn't really learn anything. This is indeed a very psychotherapeutic and psychoeducational journey. So thank you so much for joining in. And remember, we are all interconnected, and that means that we're all responsible for bringing more light to ourselves and others. Thank you, and good night, everybody. And if you've enjoyed my show, please subscribe to my channel. If you need help, please call the number below. And if you've enjoyed